Okay. We are.
And we're back.
I think being in the Arab world, being anti-Western and anti-Semite is easy to conflate as one thing.
I think so. Yeah, I think so too. Considering that Western civilization was, was built on, Judeo-Christian values. So they say. So, and again, I don't want to just like ascribe anti-Semitism to the entire Muslim/Arab world, because I do think that that's a form of bigotry in and of itself. But it is in today's Middle East, it's highly prevalent. It's interesting because it wasn't always that way. In fact, for centuries, once Islam started conquering a lot of the world, with the Jewish populations that it had in those that was there, and that actually they were actually treated far less viciously than they were in the Christian world. The Muslim world actually, a lot of the Muslim world actually treated the Jews in their lands pretty decently, with the caveat that they were all forced to pay a non-Muslim tax, which was just basically a kind of like financial way of reminding them that they were not like, in charge. But as Jewish nationalism started to emerge, and anti-Semitism rose around the world. So one could sense it, whether that's like a kind of a chicken or an egg debate, which came first. But with the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, it's just been an extreme. The Arab world's outlook on Jews became less and less charitable. And when we talk about and of course, here's the thing: when we talk about all of the, people living in that land, all of the, Palestinians who were expelled from their homes, that's obviously terrible. It's a source of great distress, and one that should be rectified. But on the other hand, at the same time, all the Jews that were living in the surrounding countries were expelled. They all fled to Israel or other parts of the world. So, and when they say, and now Israel being called an apartheid country is something that gets thrown around a lot. And factually, Israel itself is not an apartheid country. However, if you live in the Palestinian territories, life there is really shitty. And
yeah, I think it's more. Yeah,
both sides are responsible for that mess.
Yeah, so, I think the way that I've heard it used is not that it's an apartheid state, but more the state of the living conditions.
Okay. All right. I actually have heard Israel described as an apartheid state, Israel itself, which is just factually inaccurate. And
I've actually heard as recent as today that the situation over there is apartheid.
Yeah, it's an outrageous.
Several people called it Israeli apartheid.
Yeah, no, I've heard it mentioned in the media more than once. It's an outrageous accusation. However,
it's a catchword.
It's a catchphrase.
It puts people conditions people to feel a certain way.
Yeah, of course, it's designed to provoke that. Now, Gaza is basically an open air prison at this point. It's horrendous. The West Bank.
I've heard that term today, open air prison.
Yeah, I heard it. Oh, I heard it too. And in a way, I almost feel like I just got Stockholm syndrome for a second, because I got into an argument on Facebook with people about it. No one I know, the strangers are the worst. But I kept my cool. I didn't get upset. But yeah, that's basically whenever I go in and I'm like, both sides are responsible. That's all I hear, is that it's like. And here's the thing about it is that if you want to be, there's I mean, if you want, honestly, you know what? I'm just going to come out and say it. In the parts of the Palestinian territories that are not controlled by Israel, Jews are not allowed in. They're not allowed there. Whereas, you know, in Israel, there's that's not to say that that's like therefore proof that like Israel is innocent of any wrongdoing, because it isn't. But this idea that they're this constant aggressor, and I love hearing it all the time. Like all the arguments I'm hearing lately is that you know, Israel is this military superpower and it's got all this defense system, and you know, like look at what happened. Like so few like Israelis were killed and so many Palestinians were killed, and Israel is guilty of war crimes. Here's the thing, though: if Israel didn't have all of that, like didn't have all that advanced defense systems, there would have been a lot more casualties on the Israeli side. And when people say that, it makes me wonder: is that what they want? Like, would that make them happier? Like, if people were, if like the deaths were evenly distributed? And I feel like
that's an interesting catch 22.
Yeah. And I
don't mean it the way that sounds. It's very interesting when you look at it that way, because like, you're right. You know what I mean? Like that's
like, is that what they want? Would that, like, you know, it's people, you know, again, and it kills me because I've always identified as being on the left. I always have. But I mean,
I think looking at, you know, who is actually like the country is it's an Israeli country, and they have the military power, and they have, you know, they run the country. So, you know, regardless of both sides, I mean, you know, one side runs the country, right? It's just like if anyone were to try to go against the U.S. within the country, if you're like some, you know, some people like that have like militias and stuff, even if you could cause damage, you're still going up against the country, right? So, I mean, I don't think it's more like, well, which side do you want to win, like the militias or the U.S., or which side do you want to have more damage? It's just about figuring out like how to, like the scope or the scale, or figuring out how to change the situation, you know?
Yeah, I understand that. I understand. Yes, I understand what you're saying.
So ultimately, though, I think if I put myself in the shoes, which is I can't do, right. But if I was writing the story, right, I think what Sam is ultimately saying is that. So, and this is just my understanding of history, right? I know the 6-Day War. And I know Israel beat their enemies, and I understand the art of war. I know Israel beat their enemies decisively, and I will say that it was necessary to do so.
And that was honestly really the turning point for public perception of Israel. Prior to that, like the whole world was on Israel's side.
But the thing is, it was necessary to do so as a student of art of war, because I think what Sam is ultimately saying is that, like, Israel is a country the size of the state of New Jersey, surrounded by all of its enemies. If they were to be caught slipping, if they weren't in the position they were militarily, I'm not advocating either way. I'm just speaking black and white, like art of war. They would be destroyed.
Yes.
They would literally be wiped out of the Middle East.
Yep.
Like, every country that surrounds Israel is Israel's enemy.
Yeah. Yes. Although, yes, and it's only been it's over the course of time. There have been some, like, you know, pacts made with certain countries and some sort of, but that was, you know, that's been begrudgingly, and
these are out of necessity because Israel can bring things to the table.
Yeah.
What countries are those?
Let's just say the Middle East.
No. The countries he's talking about that you said have made pacts with them.
I mean, well, they have. Well, right now they have an uneasy alliance with Saudi Arabia, but that's mostly because they're both scared of Iran if Iran gets nuclear weapons.
It's weird. Egypt. It's funny. Egypt.
I was gonna
vows-
say they go in and out of
Yeah.
relationships, positive to negative relationships with Egypt.
I was gonna say, yeah, Egypt. Okay, so basically Egypt has like backed off attacking them for like a long time now. They're kind of like they're kind of like okay, but at the same, but they still won't take any of the Palestinian refugees in. I'm trying, yeah, and Lebanon, forget it. Syria is just waiting for an excuse.
The thing is, and not to paint an evil empire picture, because again, for me, this is black and white. This is art of war for me. The thing is, Israel, it has a lot of leverage. If it wasn't for military might, I'm not making an excuse one way or another, they would be gone. Like their enemies would move in and they would be gone.
And they've tried to do so many, many, many times over the past 70 years. So here's another thing. A lot of people are like, why would you even put them there of all places? So that's another question. That's the question I get asked a lot too. Here's the thing. One, it's where a lot of them wanted to go because it's where Judaism was originated and it's where they were all from and they felt a spiritual connection to it. Two, a lot of the places where, and also let's be clear, even though most of the Jews were kicked out 2,000 years ago, there was a very, very small population of Jews that were living in that region ever since. So even though it had become the minority, but a lot of the countries that specifically the Jews that were immigrating from like Eastern Europe and Russia did not want them there anymore, even though they were victims of the war. Hitler was dead, but they were like blaming them for like everything that happened. They didn't want them there. The good old US of A turned away a lot of Jewish refugees. God, we suck. We really suck sometimes.
We definitely do.
Well, let's be real.
Sometimes we're great. Sometimes we're great, but sometimes we suck.
Let's be real. I don't think that there's anywhere in the world that you could take a displaced people, give them land, put them there, and then there not be problems with the people.
Correct. Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yes, correct.
Like, people can say, why put them there? But it's like, okay, you pick a place and you'll see what the result
I've heard
will be.
that.
Just pick a place.
No, I've heard that too. No, I've heard that too. Like what? No, seriously, like Jewish people I know, Jewish progressives who are like, against the founding of Israel because of all the drama, of all the problems that it's created. You're like, why didn't we just like put them all in like Idaho or something? Like a chunk of just to carve out a chunk of land and let them live it. Yeah, but exactly. There's no place that you can put a displaced people there's just when there won't be problems. It's true, because these are people that are different culture than you are. So you saw the same thing recently with like the whole Syrian refugee problem. When they flooded Europe, like parts of Europe look really, really different now. And there's been a lot of culture clash because it's from two different cultures and they have not been adequately assimilated. And they have not been properly absorbed. I think assimilation is a two-way street. I think if you are going somewhere, or if you flee to another country that takes you in, I think it's the country's being a refugee and like being battle scarred, and it's their responsibility to be like open and generous to you and take you in and like help you and save you. But I also think it's your responsibility. If someone is nice enough to like take you into their house when you've been like kicked out of yours, you have to like it's if their rules are different than what you're used to, but they're
Right.
like you're living in their house now,
Right.
like you kind of have to like respect their rules because it's their house. So it's so so yeah, I think it's just a big thorny mess.
Sorry, my phone died.
That's okay.
I'm like, what just happened? I'm standing on my porch and I don't hear anything. And I go in to see my phone is dead. I'm on my Bluetooth headphones, so
Okay. Oh, you're on your
I can
porch?
travel. Yeah, I was standing on the porch enjoying the
Okay.
nice chill coolness of the soon to be summer air.
Yeah, it's a nice cool night. It's one of those cool nights.
Yeah, so I was on the porch and next thing I know, I didn't hear anything and I walk in and see my phone is dead. Had to throw it on the charger real quick and jump back on the Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. No, go on, Sam. You were.
Oh, I said a bunch of stuff while you were.
I'm just enjoying this education and being able to explore this.
Thank you.
Like
Thank
I really
you.
am. I learned.
show
I was
my-
removed. I didn't know what happened last week. I had no clue. You know, sometimes I'm just removed from politics, especially because I'm always in this comic world. And then today it was just every other post I saw was, you know, either anti-Semite or pro-Palestine or, you know, any variation of
Or other way around, yeah.
yeah, any variation of the argument. And I'm like, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I found myself in conversation with people who are not, you know, who don't have a obviously people who are invested in human rights, but are
yeah, of
removed
course.
from the situation. You know what I
But
mean?
it's-
And so at first I
yeah.
thought to myself, and I don't want to. I just want to say it. My first thought was, okay, here go the liberals again. All right, here go the conservatives again. And what I mean is, you know, I've been running with this theme that everybody has to have a perspective on every talking point. And so then as I've researched it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is something serious that's going on and people should be, you know what I mean? Not necessarily talking about it, but be aware and concerned when it comes to human rights. You know what I mean? So that's all I wanted to say. It was
Of course. And this is one of those things. Yeah, and it's what in this issue in particular is just it's so volatile and it's been ongoing, more and it's been more or less ongoing. But you know, prior to this, this has been going on for a little over a week, and now and of course the internet is exploding with opinions about it.
And I still don't know what happened last week.
Well, it depends on which side you ask, but one side is painting it as it being in response to a bunch of, they think that describe Israel as illegally evicting Palestinians from their homes. And the other side is just like, they fired, Hamas fired rockets at Israel. And they look at that as it's either one or the other, or like one led to the other, and so that led to Israel retaliating, and it's terrible.
So Hamas fired, did they pick specific targets or was this just random?
Hamas, I don't know how Hamas works strategically. I'm sure they just wanted to kill as many as possible. I don't know. I don't exactly know where they were I don't know if they were specifically aiming for specific targets. I don't know. But
so basically though, a lot of people just died on both sides.
Yeah, more on the Palestinian side than the Israeli side, because Israel has the Iron Dome, which is literally to repel rockets. Again, because they need that. And it's just crazy that's the kind of thing they live in. That's the situation they live in.
So what is this Iron Dome?
Oh, the Iron Dome. Oh, it's a missile thwarting defense system.
Oh, okay, a missile defense system. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. Good to see you, by the way.
I see you all the time. Good to see you too.
Got your dog. Thank you. Got your dog tags on.
Oh yeah.
So appropriate right now. But in general, I mean, I don't know if you wear them all the time or not, but
all the time.
yeah, I hear you. No. Yeah. And so obviously this is fresh in people's minds. Do you know what's so crazy? Like China is like the Chinese government is committing like an actual Holocaust against Muslims right now. And they've been doing so for like the past few years. And that rarely gets mentioned. And
well, I mean,
I'm not trying to say like, oh, what about is I'm not trying to deflect.
No.
Because I still want to stay here. But it's also like the fact that like this has been talked about like that much in the past. All it takes is like just like this and for like the past week. And this like, you know, this whole Israel Palestine, like people, you're going to see posts on social media about this for like the next month. But like China's been like up to this for like years now. And like you barely hear anything about it. And
Hamas used an art of war tactic.
Okay.
Right? Like they put their citizens in harm's way in order to gain public sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to launch an all-out military offensive against Israel.
But they can't. Like they literally could not do it. Like
they can't.
They don't have, but they don't.
And they're not oblivious to the Iron Dome.
No, they're not. They know it's there.
So what happens is a bunch of Palestinian citizens get killed, you know, which is obviously their goal. And the world, they stir up public sentiment. You know, what they're trying to fight is UN resolutions. You understand what I'm saying? Like, this is what, you know, to me, this is what it looks like. This is what I would do. If I'm reading The Art of War and I'm coming to a conclusion, well, I can't, it's non-symmetrical warfare. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do. And you know, and it's funny when I'm talking to people, and I've always identified as left of center. So I'm always like hanging out with people on the left most of the time. And this is not the perspective they have at it right now. And to them, they could never imagine that anyone would do something like this, that this is how somebody would think to try to get anything done. So they just see Palestinians as like being constant victims and even though they say they're not supporting Hamas, they kind of make excuses for their actions. And the only thing I say is like, listen, just because none of us would ever do something like that doesn't mean that nobody ever would. Like this is
how military strategists throughout history have thought, especially when like this is the art of guerrilla or non-symmetrical warfare. Like that is literally the crux of it. Like that's the core principles of it. Like you can't, obviously you're fighting someone like you said, there's no way from a military perspective, they're going to launch an offensive against Israel. So then what's the true goal of launching missiles at an Iron Dome? What's really the goal? Well, we need you to retaliate. Like this is what happens in the temple chambers, in the planning. Like this is what happens, and this is like literally Art of War. Like what's our true goal? Our goal, we're not gonna really do much damage because they have an Iron Dome. What are we grandstanding? No, we need retaliation and we need casualties. You see what I'm saying? Like this is what we need. We need casualties, and then we need to be able to play on public sentiment.
Yeah, and the organizations that are currently governing the Palestinian people actually pay the families of people who like who
martyrs. Martyrs.
Yeah.
Martyrs. Yeah. I mean, to me, again, it doesn't have to be Israel and Palestine. It could be any countries in those situations. And this is what I would conclude, because this is how warfare works. It's not just pick up your gun, I pick up my gun, and let's just go shoot each other.
Yeah. And especially
especially if you're devoted to fighting for like a cause and you believe so.
Yeah, when it's like a zealot type, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah.
That's literally, and I'm just Ish, who's sitting in a house in Kenmore, and people smarter than me plan things like this and think like this. You know, I always say if I can think of it, there are people who are paid a lot of money to have already thought of it. You understand what I'm saying? Like they already thought of it. They've already went over all of these. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, in that area of the world, the two sides. You know, no matter how it looks on paper, both sides have very intelligent people working behind the scenes. Like Hamas doesn't have the type of organization that it has had for decades without having some money and some intelligent people pulling some strings in the background. Like they just, otherwise you're just a guerrilla group, and they're not. You know what I mean? They're a terrorist organization that we have somehow managed to endure. Like everyone knows what they are, but yet they still exist.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely true. It is a terrorist organization, and people, and that's the thing that gets lost in the muck, is that like Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. And so they're still being blamed because they control like everything that's like they control the traffic that comes in and out of there, obviously, because it's essential to their own survival. The tragic thing about all this is that there are a lot of Palestinians who at this point are probably really exhausted and don't care about this anymore and just want a normal life. And it's those people who my heart breaks for. But it's also those people who are it's also those people that a lot of people I know are just assuming that is like the normal state of things, and they are just victims, and they're only victims of Israel. And no, this is a bloody mess. It started with religious zealotry. That's still what's going on. Listen, but again, what is funny, again, I don't believe in attributing like quotes, like I said, quotes from like famous people as the be all and end all. But what I said earlier about the necessity for that advanced defense system, because if it wasn't there, Israel would be wiped off the map, because it's been surrounded by people for decades that want to get rid of them. And Golda Meir, the former prime minister of Israel, once against said if the Arabs put down their guns, there would be no more violence. If the Jews put down their guns, there would be no more Israel. And while I don't, that's so basically, I mean, I'm saying the same thing that she was saying. We're both saying the same thing that she was saying. And it's funny, I feel it's such a relief to me to be able to have a conversation with someone who actually seems to be on the exact same page with me about it, because there's like literally nobody else that I've ever met, ever, even people who are like pro-Israel. I'll usually, which I am pro-Israel, and like I believe in like Israel's like right to exist and survive, and its survival and being and thriving. But I'll usually also somewhere down the line will get something like the Palestinians are all scum, and I can't with that. And so because they're because they're still human beings. So and no matter what they're taught in schools about like Jews being the source of all their problems, like it still breaks my heart that they're living like that. And again, I think that there's a lot of reasons for why it is, and I think it's all BS. But at the same time,
I find it really, really revolting when people use pejoratives about Israel the way that they used to, like describing them as like modern day Nazis.
I saw a meme with that today, and I thought it was like terrible.
Yeah, it's just like I see that, and I'm like it's all like I feel like it's all emotion based and manipulated, and I'm like, you have no idea. I'm just like, I look at that and I'm like, you have no sense of history or respect, and it's so appalling. Anyway.
I mean, a lot of these things are meant to elicit a response.
I know.
It goes back to the opposite argument when people compare oppressions and, you know.
Yeah, but that's where it comes from.
I can totally empathize because I've been in conversations where, while I am on some level not an apologist, I oppose. You know, Flav and I once had a conversation where, you know, we were talking, and a lot of times in most of these conversations I get educated, and it's like there's some situations where you're not punching down as it comes to like relations in America with, you know, racism and dealing with situations like that, you know, and sometimes when the shoe is on the other foot, because I'm always cognizant of, right, like not becoming an oppressor, right? And so I'm cognizant of these things. So I've been in arguments and situations where I've talked with people where I'm like, well, you know, we can't act this way or we can't do that. And I've been educated in the sense that, like, well, Ish, you know, you're not necessarily punching down in the situation, and it's not the same, you know. And I totally understand and empathize with what you're saying when you see something like comparing Jews to Nazis, because it took me a minute to realize, like, I was an extremist about being an anti-oppressionist, and I still am. However, I also understand that in given situations, my reaction towards certain things is not the same as when, you know, my people were in chains getting whipped or, you know, forced to, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same, and it's just not. And it's something that I had to come to, like, wait a minute, it's not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And I think that's the thing, is like a lot of times those issues get like it's people are like, it's very simple. There's either the oppressor or there's like people who are oppressed and people who are not, but it's for different reasons, and history is, and it's none of it doesn't excuse anything or make it okay. But to add on to that, I will say this, as someone who identifies with someone being left of center, I've always believed it was like, well, I mean, I think it should just be a human thing to like fight for people who are being oppressed, and to like root for the underdog and to help the underdog like get a leg up and get on even footing. And so, you know, for like decades now, Israel has been painted as like the top dog, because they have like the backing of the US, and because they have like all this US funding that allows them to have this like really advanced military. And so that, like, you know, people have been portrayed on both sides as like this oppressive force. But again, it goes back to the point that like it's the size of New Jersey, and they're surrounded by dozens of dozens of countries with like over 1 billion people who don't like them. So, you know, when you put it in that context, like, how could it be the same? And at what point are you going to, and how long are you going to get mad? Like, how are you? And yeah, so I was just going to say something else, and I feel like that simplified it a little too much, but honestly, there are just a lot of people out there who wish that we would stop breathing, but it's aside from that, but that's really that. Okay, I'm gonna stop. But in any event, I feel horrible. I mean, obviously I feel terrible for all the like the women, like all the children that were killed. There's like, this is not okay, but
this has gotten to this point because it's been like this. Like, I honestly feel like Israel in a way has turned into a monster, but it's turned into a monster because it's been surrounded by monsters this whole time. Do you know what they say? Like before you diagnose yourself with depression, first make sure you're not surrounded by assholes. Like if you are around the wrong people who treat you wrong, you will turn into that. People who are abused become abusive. So I feel like that's what's happening with Israel right now. And it's experienced right now, it's really vile. It's experienced like in Israel, there's a real upsurge in like Jewish supremacy and like racism and viewing of Arabs as like beneath them. And it wasn't always like that. It's really, really bad right now. And not to say that that's ever okay, that it's like that there's ever a reason to justify racism or like viewing someone as less than you, but it goes both ways, and they've been on the receiving end of that for a long time. So it's they're both like again. So
it's an interesting situation, right? Where you have Jewish supremacy in a world like it's like you have this concept of Jewish supremacy, where like the Palestinians are lesser and the Jewish people are living in a world where like the Arab world looks down on them. It's like this weird, like, you know, like you're looking in a mirror at yourself, looking in a mirror at yourself, looking in a mirror at yourself, looking in a mirror. Like it's just like this weird dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Like where it's like,
never ending.
Yeah.
So it's not even just the Arabs either.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not even looking to compete in the oppression Olympics either, because I don't really feel like
well, it shouldn't be an Olympics.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like the real problem here is, you know, it's not like Jewish people want to oppress anyone. It's the government. It's the you know, it's always the countries.
Yes.
It's always the countries that are doing the wrong, right? It's not like anyone here in the U.S. wants to be oppressing people. It's like the police or it's the state. You know, it's always the people that are in control. So my
argument, and I don't want to argue about it. I don't mean it like that. I'm just using it for lack of a better term. Is from my own personal experience, and again, not to compare compression. There are just some people walking around the United States that want to oppress, you know what I mean?
I think that there are, but I definitely think that there are, but I understand.
You're right, Mike.
Right, but it always comes back to the higher, you know, the stronger powers, the institutions, the states, you know, the governments, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Is the problem, and we have to somehow separate the two.
I agree, because I definitely just like I